I remember having a friend who's a religious writer, and their work is not one that's in vogue at the moment, and they wrote many books. And for years and years, they kept writing books, but you know what it's like as a writer. Unless your work is where it needs to be, nobody publishes them. But my friend kept at it, never wavering in their self-belief, kept writing more books and expanding their volume until one day there was that one person who recognized the beauty of what they were doing, the heart of what they were doing, and finally published multiple books of theirs, and it all worked out. And they continued living from that place of heart. And observing that, I've often thought, that is faith, right? That's faith, to keep going throughout all of that, knowing and building and spending endless years and not having anything to go the way you want it. What is faith? Faith is that deep belief in something you can't always quite grasp. But even though you can't grasp what it is, you just keep on going, one foot in front of the other, no matter what comes your way. And faith in Hebrew is emunah. And it's the same, similar to the word amen. When we say amen to all of our prayers, we're saying, I believe, I have faith, amen, amen. And this holiday of Sukkot is often related to this idea of faith. And the Sukkah is called the shelter of faith. This is in the Zohar, it's called the Tzela de Mehemnutas, the shelter of faith. Why is it a shelter of faith? Because it's such a flimsy booth. And anybody who's celebrated Sukkot in the Sukkah in the Chicago fall knows you need to have a little bit of faith to spend time in it, because you know what's going to come your way. And it was also the shelter of faith back originally when the story comes from. The Sukkot were the Sukkot that the children of Israel slept in every night in the wilderness for 40 years. It was a symbol of how precarious their situation was. You need to have a lot of faith to trust this little flimsy booth that was around you. And that's all they had in life. They didn't have a home. They just wandered for 40 years. It was a symbol for their entire life, which was built completely on faith. And for us Jews, faith is an interesting concept because we sometimes associate it more with the religious lives of our neighbors than with our own. What's often taught is we're not the people who believe, we're the people who do. And there is truth to that. Judaism, you can believe whatever you want, and you're still part of the fold, still part of the Jewish people. We're not a religion that's built on a specific faith. But there is a faith that has always been part of the Jewish people. There's always been deeply inside of us, an emunah. And that's been a faith that despite the fact that we've lived with a sukkah over our heads for so very long, we have faith that it's going to be okay. And we persevere. Sometimes we don't even think it's going to be okay, but we persevere anyway. A deep faith, a deep resilience that there is some kind of plan out there, and even though we cannot always see it or feel it, we just keep on going. We have our Torah on one side, and we have I've spoken about over the last months, we have our love for our fellow Jews on the other, we have our smarts, our love of education still on the other, our love for our God. I believe, ani ma'amin, I believe in the coming of the Messiah, and even though we tarry, still I believe. Words that we keep on singing. We sing here at Passover, at the Seder, or Yom Kippur. And maybe it's even a little bit different than that. And so the faith of the Sukkot goes back to this debate in the Talmud. In the Talmud, there's this big debate about what exactly were these Sukkot, the booths, because the Torah doesn't exactly say there were these 4 poles and little decorations that the preschoolers make inside. And at a certain point in this debate, Rabbi Akiva, who was the great architect, a rabbi who really foresaw how the Jewish people could survive through all of it, and he said, you know what? the Sukkot weren't even made of a single physical material. They were actually these clouds that surrounded the Jewish people. That's how deep their faith was. There wasn't even the decorations. What I think he was saying is that our faith isn't that we have this sukkah around us and however flimsy it is, we believe in it still. But it's even more than that. And that is that faith itself is our sukkah. And the faith itself is what shelters us. And the faith itself is what protects us. And it's not a blind faith. Now, the sukkah is flimsy, but it still has 3.5 walls, or 2.5 at the time of COVID, to make it a little bit more airy. And it does feel like there are a few less walls during COVID. But the sukkah is not supposed to waver in the wind, and it gives us shelter through everything that we go through. This is a very unique Jewish perspective. And Rabbi Akiva was trying to build a sense of faith that transcends anything circumstantial in the life around you. What do you do when everything around you is falling apart and you're not sure what you believe? What do you have faith in? And so those generations created a Judaism that has all the tools you need to have faith and to live in a different way. And the historian Yerushalmi speaks of this in a very profound way. And he says, well, us Jews, what did we do throughout all these years of survival? He said, what we did is we kind of lived a little bit in the world where we were, but really we were in our own world. We had our Torah, and even if you looked outside, who cared what happened in the world around you? We're going to live inside our Torah. We're going to read the stories of Abraham and Isaac and Sarah and Rivka. We're going to live in our shtetl, and what happens around us, we're not even going to take part in it because this is our way of survival and of not being hurt constantly by what's happening around us. And eventually, what is our faith? Our faith is we'll be led to Zion. It's going to happen. We'll be reunited. And there'll be acts of kindness done for us. And we keep believing. And when some of the schach falls down from our sukkah, the schach is the cover on top, as has happened to the Jewish people many times, and they've lost belief, and there have been great disasters. But still, we'll put on more schach, and we'll keep with that sukkah of resilience, of faith. And that faith has been so deep that it has paralyzed us at times. It has been hard to move almost forward, backwards, sideways, because our faith has been so deep and so part of who we are. It's interesting how different it is for our generations. Our generations, we live a different world. We don't need a sukkah. We actually have homes built out of brick, built out of concrete. We have an actual roof over our heads and all the comforts, and our roofs don't leak. And it can feel to us that we don't really need a sukkah of faith, a tzelah de mehemnuta. We don't need that faith in our resilience because we're all okay. And that sukkah that we were handed by the generations before us, that sukkah of resilience, of deep faith, no matter what, of resilience, of even if the roof falls off, you just thread a few new strands of schach, that one we wonder what to do with it, because it doesn't really fit the circumstances of where we're standing right now. But this last period, going through a pandemic and everything that has come with it, has made clear to us that we can't totally make do without faith. Faith is part of what we need in this world. Perhaps what this period of Jewish history needs is to create a new sukkah of faith. We've had the same sukkah for 2,000 years. Maybe what we need is a new sukkah. And one that's not only about Jewish resilience and about our ancient past, about our faith that we're going to be renewed, but also that looks forward towards the future. We can also live in a brick and mortar home at the same time, but keep a little opening to the stars to remember what it's like to travel around. And a sukkah that accepts the fact that Jewish people have a special destiny, but does not reject the truth of other peoples, but that sees the richness that we can bring to the world from our place of solidity and humanity through the blossoming of a new period of Jewish history, and one where we can live through the cycle of the Torah of Jews have done for so very long and the Jewish calendar, but at the same time be firmly living in the world around us with treasures to share with each other, but also with our neighbors, and passing that on to the next generations, and writing new pages of what observance and what ideals and what rituals look like in our world. A sukkah where we choose to use some of the materials that we were given and we love, but also bring in new materials, new ideas to get us through the new challenges and burdens of the years ahead. And perhaps the new sukkah of faith will incorporate some of the old sukkah and some of half of it, and maybe some of it will be completely new, our love of the past and our hope for the future. And this time of year, after the holidays, after all the thinking and all the contemplating, both as a people but also as individuals, is when we're thinking, what is the sukkah that we want to build of our faith in the year ahead? How do we want to live our faith in the year that's coming? What walls do we want to put on it? What beautiful decorations do we want to fill it with? What will the top live? As we live through historic days, we also can ask those big questions about our people, about the religious life we want to create, about the community that we hope to live in. What is the sukkah behind all of it that we're building? What are the walls? What is the roof? And what are we filling it with? What is the love, the spirit, the decorations that we fill it with? And how do we manage to always keep enough space between the schach, between the roof, so that we can look up at the stars and keep imagining a new world and a new self? Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom.